Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday morning, November the 8th. It looks like a storm could slam into the West Coast, into California and other western states late next week. We're talking probably Thursday, Friday, Saturday time frame. Ahead of it, there'll be a strong upper level ridge setting up across the central and eastern states. And that storm will be associated with a very vigorous upper level low that could end up being kind of a pattern changing type of system. It'll translate from west to east after it hits the west coast late next week. It could really be the catalyst to get rid of that central and eastern U.S. strong ridge that again will set up over the next few days ahead of that California storm system, which again looks like it'll hit the west coast late next week. Before we get to the weather situation across the continental U.S., wanted to kind of re-examine El Nino. We posted our winter outlook a couple of weeks ago, and one of the big factors was the expectation of an El Nino event in the tropical Pacific Ocean, and we certainly said we'll continue to monitor the situation during the weeks headed into the winter season. In the winter outlook, I mentioned did not expect to see a super strong El Nino, and that continues to be the case. A super strong El Nino often overwhelms the eastern and southern U.S. with mild air, and I do not expect that to happen as indicated in the winter outlook. Basically expecting colder than normal conditions in the southern and eastern U.S. and snowier than normal conditions in the southern and eastern U.S. And this is a series of maps here that really indicate that even though the sea surface temperatures look like it's a strong El Nino event right now in the tropical Pacific Ocean, the atmosphere is not really responding as such. Couple of videos ago I mentioned that there's really no signs of a super strong southern branch of the jet stream, which would be the case with a super strong El Nino. This is another way to look at the atmospheric response. What we're looking at basically upward motion across the Pacific Ocean. The first three years here are years in which we had very strong El Ninos: 1982, 83, 1997, 1998, and the most recent one, 2015, 2016. Very strong El Nino events, without question, those 3 years. And here's the equator, this black line right here. And what we're seeing is basically, it's called velocity potential, but we're basically looking at upward motion in the atmosphere over the tropical Pacific Ocean during these strong, very strong El Nino events. And this is during the month of October, the entire month of October. Very impressive here, 1982 time frame leading into that 82, 83 El Nino event. Very strong here also during that very strong El Nino event of 97, 98. Very, very strong 2015, 2016. Again, this is leading into that winter season. These are October maps of upward motion. Look at where we're just experienced here in the month of October this year. A very weak signal relative to those strong El Nino events. So again, this is kind of an atmospheric response to those warmer than normal sea surface temperatures in the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. And the atmosphere is certainly confirming our notion, as outlined in the winter outlook, that this will not be a super strong El Nino event. In fact, it looks like it reaches a peak early in the winter season and then weakens during much of the mid and latter part of the winter season. By the time we get to next spring, or certainly by next summer, could be back to a La Nina condition out in the tropical Pacific Ocean with colder than normal sea surface temperatures. So again, we wanted to kind of update things as we get closer and closer to the winter season. Well, now let's kind of focus in on the potential big storm for California late next week. It's a relatively quiet weather pattern across the nation this week, kind of a topsy-turvy temperature pattern in the mid-Atlantic region, northeast U.S. It'll be cooler today, milder tomorrow, and then cooler again on Friday. It looks like we're setting up for a chilly weekend in this part of the nation. This is the 10-day forecast map from last night's 0Z run of the European model. Total accumulated precipitation, and here we go. This includes that California storm that, again, looks like it's basically late next week. We're talking maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday, the end of next week. And certainly a lot of this will fall in the form of snow over those Sierra Nevada mountains of eastern California late next week. But a significant storm system we'll see in a moment, supported by a very strong upper level trough. Looks like it slams into the west coast late next week. Also, a lot of rainfall over the next several days across the Gulf of Mexico region. Well, let's walk through the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps from last night's zero-Z run of the European model. Starting off with upper level low over northern New England, cooler than normal conditions throughout New England today. Kind of bounces back tomorrow, certainly down to New York City. We'll have a much warmer day on Thursday, Philadelphia, D.C., as compared with today. A strong ridge over the south central part of the nation, leading into the Mississippi Valley region as well. Now, let's push forward here, and not a heck of a lot of activity out across the western U.S. Here we are now on Thursday, and again, that ridge kind of pokes up into the mid-Atlantic region. Cooler today compared to yesterday in the mid-Atlantic region, but then much milder again on Thursday, only to fall back to cooler conditions on Friday. And this time, the cool weather looks like it'll stick around for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday in the mid-Atlantic, in the northeast U.S. And here we go now into the end of the work week this Friday, November 10th. And let's move quickly here. Again, not a heck of a lot going on over the upcoming weekend nationwide. Going into the early part of next week, a weak ridge showing up in the western U.S. by the end of the upcoming weekend. Go into the early part of next week, and here's that strong ridge I alluded to earlier that will develop by early next week across the central part of the U.S. Associated with this will be much warmer than normal temperatures as well. And then we start sliding through next week. This ridge tends to expand to the east here, and with it will be warmer than normal conditions into the mid-Atlantic, northeast U.S. maybe by the middle of next week. But here, it's the beginning stages of that California storm system. Very vigorous upper level low by the middle of next week over the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean. It kind of gets rotated around with another system sliding to the south Andes from the eastern Pacific, and this is next Friday. A week from this Friday, we're talking about next Friday, November 17th. A very powerful storm system looks like it'll slam into the west coast, and meanwhile ahead of it, strong ridging over the middle and eastern part of the nation. This will ultimately slide to the east and very well could take out this ridge that sets up in the central and eastern states later next week. But again, very strong storm system aided by a strong upper level low slams into California late next week. Well, let's take a look at the surface forecast maps, again using the conventional version of the European model from zero-Z last night. We'll walk quickly through this. Kind of a cool blast today across New England, northerly winds all the way down into D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, much cooler than yesterday. Then we have a cold frontal system that slides to the east and sweeps through the eastern seaboard by the time we get to the end of the work week here on Friday. And again, it gets chilly on Friday, mid-Atlantic, northeast U.S. And this time it doesn't go back to milder weather afterwards. It looks like it stays chilly on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, Boston. And meanwhile, out in the west, pretty dry weather at the end of this week and going into the upcoming weekend. Now, let's quickly go through the weekend and into the early part of next week. We talked about that strong upper level ridge setting up by early next week across the central part of the nation. This is now the Monday morning forecast map. This is mild weather, milder than normal conditions here across the central states early next week with the introduction of that strong upper level ridge over the central part of the nation. Then we slide through next week. That ridge tends to push to the east, and it'll turn milder by the middle of next week in the mid-Atlantic, northeast U.S. And then we start to see the beginnings of that powerful storm system over the eastern Pacific into the California area. And again, this particular map forecast model does not show blue, does not show snow. All this precipitation here over the eastern California Sierra Nevada mountains will fall most likely in the form of snow, not shown here by a different color on the European model. By the way, these maps all available on tropicaltidbits.com. We'll go towards the end of next week, and here we go. The very strong storm system slides to the east. Again, it'll be aided by a strong upper level low. This is the surface system right here. And a lot of this precipitation will form again as snow in those higher elevations, and not only of California, but the rest of the interior western states as well. And we'll go out a little bit farther in time, and all of this starts to move to the east. We're now 10 days out from today. This is all the way to the end of next week. We're talking about Friday, November 17th at this particular time. But the big story next week looks like much warmer in the central U.S. with a strong upper level ridge for a few days, and then a strong storm system slams into California by the end of next week. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.